The New Testament, especially the writings of Paul, boast of finding joy despite our circumstances. But Jeremiah seems to struggle in his calling. He will praise God, but then in the next breath curse the day he was born. He seems to find no joy from his calling in life as a prophet, except for in Jeremiah 15, verse 16. How do we balance Paul's writings with Jeremiah's prayers for our own lives? Was Paul just better at finding joy than Jeremiah was? Since Jeremiah wasn't finding joy, should he have just looked harder? How do we approach a calling or situation in our lives that either doesn't bring joy or sucks the joy out? One of the beautiful things about Scripture is its honesty. It tells real stories of real people who had real experiences and had real feelings. They were human. Jeremiah was a man who really struggled with what God had called him to. And to be fair, his calling was difficult, right? I mean, he would call out the sins of a nation. He would prophesy coming judgment that was going to be poured out on them. And he was constantly rejected over and over and over again. I mean, that's hard. If you do that for years, you can see how that would really wear on a person like it wore on Jeremiah. Jeremiah knew that one day the Lord would restore his people. But he also knew that he probably wouldn't live long enough to see God do that. So he understood of a coming hope. He understood the hope that God was promising to them, but it was so far into the future. Really, when we think about it, the faithfulness of Jeremiah was astounding. It's amazing how faithful he was. But he was a human being who had his own weaknesses. And one of those weaknesses was his struggle with his calling, his struggle with his work. I mean, we call him the weeping prophet for a reason. His grief was in abundance. That sounds pretty different from what we see in Paul. Paul was also a human being who had his own thorn in the flesh, who had his own sufferings that he had to deal with. He had his own challenges he had to overcome and face on a daily basis. Maybe Paul was better at finding joy than Jeremiah was, but I think Paul had a very distinct advantage. You see, while Jeremiah was looking forward to the promised hope, Paul was looking back to see hope fulfilled in Jesus Christ. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 13 says, "But we do not want you to be uninformed, brothers, about those who are asleep, that you may not grieve as others do who have no hope." This verse is specifically about people grieving over the loss of loved ones. Paul goes on to reassure them that those who have fallen asleep, those who have died, if they are in Christ, they will return with Christ. That Jesus is such a strong hope that not even death can take it away. I think this principle applies to more than grieving the loss of a loved one. Because surely there are more things in this world that grieve us, that give us grief other than the loss of loved ones. Sometimes what God calls us to is hard. And no matter how hard or how long we look into the calling to find joy, sometimes what we find, as Jeremiah found, who surely looked long and hard, sometimes what we find is grief. But that's because the calling was never supposed to be the source of joy. We may enjoy it, but it is not our ultimate source of joy. It's not what defines joy in our life. Paul says we do not grieve as those who have no hope. What he did not say is we do not grieve. I want to tell you it's okay to feel it. Actually, I would tell you to feel it, to process it, to vent it if you need to take it before the Lord and cast all of your anxieties on him, for he cares for you. And when you feel it, don't pretend like it's not there. Or don't sweep it under the rug. Don't hide it in the closet. Feel it. But remember, the feelings that you're experiencing, the hardship that you're experiencing, the grief that you're experiencing, those are not things that define you. Those are not things that have the final say. Even the calling on your life doesn't define you. The only one who can and does define you is Jesus Christ, who calls you beloved. Christ is who defines us. Christ is the source of our joy. We must continually look to him. You see, in life we have a cup, right? And our life has put a hole in the bottom of our cup where we can run empty. Where it drains things out of us. It takes from us. So we must continually be looking to Christ so that we can pour the joy that comes from Christ into our cup. We do that by pouring our hearts out before the Lord in prayer. We do that by a steady diet of His Word. We do that on meditating on the truth of the gospel, reminding ourselves constantly that He is good, that He is love. Because if we don't keep reminding ourselves, if we don't keep doing those things to pour the joy of Christ into our lives, life will surely drain it out. When the psalmist describes God as his rock, his refuge, his shield, those are not just poetic words. Those are actually a battle plan. Those are a strategy that says that all that's happening in life is draining stuff out of my cup, so I need God to protect me. I need God to be my source of joy and security. I need Him to be everything to me. I know that sometimes we go through things, sometimes we're called to things that are just bigger than us. So we have to focus all the more that no matter how big they are, how hard they are, they're not bigger than Christ. He is our source, and we must continually look to Him. Don't look to the calling for what Christ is meant to be.